What makes a person who has it all? A brilliant mind, a powerful family, a clear path to fame and fortune? Just walk away from it. For a life of quiet service, no less. Well, that's the incredible story of George Herbert, a 17th century poet and priest whose life was thankfully captured for us by his friend, Izaak Walton.
And our guide for this whole explainer is Walton's biography. You have to understand he wrote this with a very specific goal in mind, to make sure the memory of a man he saw as a true model of holiness wasn't lost.
And this quote right here, it gets right to the heart of it. Walton basically believed that just telling stories wasn't enough. Memories fade, details get lost. He thought the written word was the only way to truly preserve someone's good deeds. His mission was to create a permanent record so that we, generations later, could learn from Herbert's example.
So this brings us to the central puzzle of George Herbert's life. Here was a guy who had everything the world could possibly offer right at his fingertips. Brains, connections, you name it. So why on earth did he make the radical choice to become a humble priest in the middle of nowhere?
To even begin to understand that choice, we have to go back, way back, to the beginning, to a childhood that basically screamed destined for greatness from day one.
Herbert was born into a really important family, the fifth of 7 boys. Now, his father died when he was just 3 years old, so his whole upbringing was shaped by his mother, Lady Magdalen Herbert. And she was a force of nature, incredibly smart and deeply religious. She made sure he got the best education, and sure enough, at Westminster School, he quickly got a reputation for being both wickedly smart and incredibly devout.
And when he got to Cambridge University, wow, he just took off. Just look at this timeline. It's an absolutely meteoric rise. By the time he's only 22, he's already got his Master of Arts and is a major fellow of his college. He was, for all intents and purposes, an academic rock star.
This little snippet gives you a fantastic peek into the circles he was moving in. This is from a letter written by the famous poet John Donne, who is a close family friend. And get this, Donne isn't just saying nice things, he's sending his own sacred poems to Herbert's mother for her opinion. That tells you everything about the kind of intellectual and spiritual respect the Herbert family commanded.
But life's never that simple. This path of academic glory and social success wasn't the only option on the table. Pretty soon, Herbert found himself at a huge fork in the road, staring down 2 completely different futures. On one side, you have the court. This was the fast track, a life of, in his own words, honor and pleasure and worldly ambition, the life of power. But on the other side, there was this deep, nagging call to serve God, to be a priest, a path defined not by fame, but by humility. And for years, he was genuinely torn right down the middle.
So what finally made the decision for him? Well, according to Walton, it was a series of devastating losses. Several of his most important friends and patrons at court died one after another. And then, in 1627, his beloved mother passed away. It was almost as if life itself was closing the doors to worldly success, making the path to his true spiritual calling the only one left open.
And so, he finally did it. He made the choice. He turned his back on the hustle of London and the prestige of Cambridge and devoted his life to being a parson in a tiny little village called Bemerton.
And as he starts this brand new life, his personal life just clicks into place in the most amazing way. He's introduced to a woman named Jane Danvers. Her father had admired Herbert for years and had talked about him so much that Jane felt like she already knew and loved him before they'd even met. The connection was so instant, so powerful that they got married just 3 days later. And by all accounts, it was a perfectly happy and harmonious marriage.
Now here's the part that is truly astonishing. His time in that parish? It was incredibly short. Plagued by poor health his whole life, George Herbert served as the parson of Bemerton for less than 3 years. When you realize that, the incredible impact he had, the legacy he left behind, becomes even more amazing.
So how did he do so much in so little time? Well, he had a very clear, very practical approach. He didn't just stand up there and read the services. No, he explained them. He'd walk his parishioners through the scripture. He'd explain the why behind the prayers, like why we start with confession before we move to praise. He made faith something they could understand and really connect with.
And this humility wasn't just an idea for him. He lived it. Walton tells this really moving story about a poor woman from his parish who was just too scared to even speak up. Instead of brushing her aside, Herbert took her by the hand, sat her down, and said, "Speak, good mother, be not afraid. I am a man that will hear you with patience." And he did. He listened to all her problems, gave her some money, and told her that from now on, she was under his care. This deep and gentle faith, this way of living, would soon face its greatest test. The final chapter of Herbert's life was defined by a long and painful illness.
As he was wasting away from consumption, his wife begged him to just rest, worried that leading prayers every day was just draining the last bit of life from him. But his answer? It just sums up his entire philosophy. He admitted it was hard, but he told her his life could not be better spent than in the service of his master Jesus, who had done and suffered so much for him.
After telling all these stories of Herbert's kindness and devotion, Walton gives us this simple, but incredibly powerful final verdict. He writes that George Herbert, the man who gave it all up for a quiet life of service, died without a single enemy.
And that really leaves us with a question for ourselves, doesn't it? In our world today, a world that is so often obsessed with measuring success by how much money you have, how much status you have, what can we learn from a life that was measured instead by its humility, its service, and its grace?